the coolest part, and I think why like breath work is in this like renaissance phase right now, is unlike meditation and some other things of like other types of relaxation techniques, is you can feel a real-time difference like right away.
All right, welcome to our next episode of A Little Higher. I am super excited to introduce our next guest. We have Josh Duntz with us. He is a former Navy Special Operations. He's also an ultramarathon runner and a breathwork coach, more specifically a Oxygen Advantage coach. And most excitingly, he's my cousin. So welcome to the show, Josh. Excited to have you here with us today. We are going to talk about the topic of breathwork and how we can take something that might seem big and scary and apply it. How anyone can take some tools away from today.
Yeah,
and
thanks
breathing.
for having me.
Yeah. So I would love to introduce kind of the high-level concept of what breathwork is, and maybe, obviously it's been around forever, but where we started to have it form what it is now.
Sure. I think at like a super high level, breath work is just a way for humans to be able to control their nervous system and their physiology in real time, just like other practices like meditation or working out. It just happens to be probably the most effective form of nervous system modulation that's available to humans.
Cool. I think one of the coolest things about breathwork too is it's something that you always have with you. Like some of the other forms of regulating your nervous system or any other of your other systems, like we talk about the endocannabinoid system a lot on this show, breath is always with you. So it's something, if you can kind of gain some foundational tools, it's something you can tap into at any time of day or night and have it support you. And before we kind of dive more into it, I would love to just paint a little bit more of a picture of why you're, qualified to even talk about breath work. And it's been a fun journey watching you with your former or your existing company, Stasis. You, right before the pandemic, had this amazing company and concept, and then the pandemic hit and you pivoted hard into breath work. So it was cold plunge tanks, which now everyone has a cold. Yeah, everyone has a cold plunge.
We were definitely on
design.
to something there.
Yeah, you were a trendsetter. But COVID really forced you to need to pivot that. And so you pivoted into breathwork and got some really amazing contracts with hospitals in the United States. Do you want to tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I just, originally kind of got into human performance optimization when I was in the military. And then when I was leaving the military, trying to figure out what was next for me, that's when the idea for Stasis was born. And then, like you said, the pandemic started and the direction of the company shifted from more like human performance, working with athletes and military operators, to then working more in the healthcare field and helping people with what we call autonomic reconditioning or respiratory therapy. A lot of chronic diseases and autoimmune diseases are nervous system related. So that's like a very easy step. And like you said, it's something that's available to people. You don't need technology. There are tools that can kind of help track and, from a data management standpoint, but at the end of the day, like we can breathe whenever we want. So
Thank
it
goodness.
just, yeah. So that was kind of the direction that the company went into. And yeah, we started working with like a ton of hospitals throughout the country and stuff. And I've recently walked away from the company and kind of handed off it to someone else who's running with it. But yeah,
But it's really impressive. I mean, you developed a program around how people with long haul COVID or other chronic illnesses can use breath work as part of their recovery. And I remember you visiting us sometimes and like being on calls with people and like teaching people how to breathe. It's something we take for granted, I think, our breath, and then like just really learning how to do it. I know I've taken a lot of our conversations and it's been life-changing to just be able to do something so simple in a potentially chaotic moment. So cool background there. Way to pivot, like many of us had to during COVID. And so now talk to us about the more inner workings of breath work. What is it doing on a, inside your body level?
Yeah, so if we look at the nervous system, you have two main branches, sympathetic, parasympathetic. They're kind of opposite of each other and they do opposite things. So you can think of the sympathetic nervous system as like the accelerator of the body. So it's preparing the body for fight or flight most of the time. And then the parasympathetic is kind of the brake pedal. So slowing everything down, rest and digest is what it's kind of typically correlated to. And those two things, or that autonomic nervous system, controls pretty much every major organ and function in our body, from heart rate, your temperature, blood pressure, everything that's going on a second to second basis. And prior to probably like 50 years ago or something, we thought that you had no ability to control that system at all.
Just as short as 50 years ago?
Maybe even, I'm not even sure exactly, but it's like pretty recently that like we discovered that, you actually have the ability to like control this nervous system. Right. That's why it's called automatic, because it's like we thought it was just running on its own.
Just a reaction to its environment. Right.
And then we started discovering these things, meditation, yoga, breath work that would have an effect on it.
So cool.
And most recently, Andrew Huberman and his lab did a study that showed a specific type of breath work. It's called the physiological sigh. Was the most effective way of activating that parasympathetic branch over like meditation and some other traditional types of breathing that we had traditionally thought were much more powerful.
So we're really like still in the trenches of learning about it.
For sure. Very early stages, I would say.
Is that sympathetic sigh some of what you do in yoga when they have you like do that deep? Nope.
What?
That when you're in yoga and they're like, all right, and everyone's like, no.
Yeah, that's kind of, physiological
sigh.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to talk about like how disease can be rooted in this chronic stress on your nervous system. So even the healthiest person in the world could benefit from something like this.
I mean, chronic stress is like the underlying mechanism to most chronic diseases.
Right.
And it just has a huge impact on your body. So
crazy.
Yeah.
Now we know we have the autonomic nervous system, and within that we have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. All gas, no brakes, and one is brakes. I know we grew up probably all gas, no brakes system on high alert. Let's talk about what maybe 4 or 3 breathing exercises that we can do to rev ourselves up or take ourselves down.
Yeah, you really have those two sides. So you have, when I look at breath work, like holistically, those are kind of the two different camps or like types of breathing you can do. One is mainly like hyperventilation, which is like very fast, rapid breathing. That's the gas pedal, right?
All right.
People use this to help with kind of stress modulation or like nervous system adaptation, right? So if you can kind of bring yourself up to this like high level and then use other types of breath work to slow it down, your system,
like
your system gets used to kind of being in that high threat, and then I'm safe, high threat, and like most people don't have that flexibility, so they can like once you get in this high stress state, like people stay there.
It's really hard to come.
Yeah. So if you can kind of start to play around with that and get more flexibility.
I relate it to like maybe when you're driving home from work and you sit in your car for just a little extra time to try to like come out of that high stress environment.
Yeah, so you have hyperventilation based routines for people familiar, like Wim Hof method, like that's what that is mainly. And then you kind of have like slower, more relaxation based breathing. Really popular one for that is physiological sigh. Now we know that's actually probably more effective than what used to be very popular, which is just a 4-6 breathing. So inhaling for 4 seconds and then exhaling for 6 seconds. And the way that people can think about this like very easily, if you're breathing like, rapid, probably anything over like 12 to 14 breaths per minute, you're kind of getting into that hyperventilation. And then if you're trying to breathe really slowly, optimally around 6 breaths per minute, that's kind of when you're at that.
Per minute?
Yeah.
6. So you're essentially holding your breath for...
Well, so that would be, if you're at 6 breaths per minute, then you're following like a 4-second inhale and a 6-second exhale.
Okay.
And if you're trying to relax, you always want to try to have your exhale longer than your inhale.
Okay.
'Cause
That's a
you're,
good key pro tip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those branches of the nervous system are kind of related to the inhale and exhale.
Okay.
You can see this. It's really cool if you have like a heart rate monitor or something. When you inhale, your heart rate, it's always going to increase. And then when you start to exhale, your heart rate comes back down.
And that's why you want to hold it just a little
so
longer.
you can kind of, so you can kind of see
Really cool.
the nervous system actually responding to
So
your
cool.
breath cycles in real time.
Yeah.
So those are the two main different or types of breath work you can do. And then within each one of those, there's obviously, you can kind of just play around with different routines and stuff and find out what feels best for you.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Use that a lot when I know you're training for a big ultramarathon right now. Are you really being intentional about your breath through that to like break through probably, of course, the physical component of it, but probably really the mental component of it?
Yeah,
too?
the biggest thing for me right now is because the distance is so long is trying to stay in that like zone 2 area.
Okay.
And the best way to do that is by, if you can maintain nasal breathing the whole time, you're pretty confident that you're in that zone 2. So that's like the biggest thing that I'm trying to focus on, and just like very smooth breaths in and out through my nose. And then another thing that's helped a lot is that physiological sigh. Like,
So can you give us an example of what that is?
so it's basically like, people can think of like if you're ever like crying, or if you remember when you were a kid, when you were having like a temper tantrum, like it's just natural. Like your body does it. Like after you're done crying, you're like, and you like feel that kind of like wave. That's a physiological sigh.
Very
so what
cool.
it is like practically is it's a double inhale and then an exhale. So it's kind of like a big inhale and then like at the top another little one, and then
and like let go.
yeah, and
with
just like
it.
kind of
Yeah.
let everything go. But it's very effective in getting rid of like side cramps. Like if
Oh,
people,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
because that's actually like a nerve issue.
Okay. It's
so
like a nerve spasm.
Yeah, so it's like super effective
That's
at
cool.
kind of getting that relieved. So I'll use that sometimes. And then also just like if I'm noticing my breath get a little out of control, or I feel like it's kind of on that edge of like me wanting to breathe through my mouth, I'll do the double inhale exhale for a couple minutes. So I can just like really feel myself kind of relaxing back down. Yeah.
And you mentioned something about zone 2. So for anyone listening that might not, be an ultramarathon runner and understand that, can you explain what the zones are and how that could potentially apply?
Yeah. So most people typically, well, there's like 5 zones really.
Okay.
The first 3 are aerobic based. So that's when your body's mainly burning fat as fuel.
Okay.
And then the last 2, zone 4 and zone 5, are anaerobic. So that's when you start to burn glycogen mainly as your fuel source. So like that would be more if you're like sprinting or like super high intensity. Yeah. And the problem with those zones is you only have a finite amount of glycogen in your system. So like you can only stay in those high level zones for a short amount of time before you have to refuel, or like your body's just not capable of staying in those zones for long periods of time.
Yeah.
That zone 2 area is kind of like you can quote, hypothetically stay in that zone forever because your body's burning fat as
And it's
fuel.
like reproducing.
Yeah, and you're not creating a lot of lactic acid in the muscles.
Okay.
So
Cool. Very cool. Okay, and now maybe some breathing, technical things for getting started. So where in your body you're breathing. So I know you've helped me realize like I'm breathing into my shoulders or I'm breathing into my belly. So talk to us about what's happening when we're breathing into the different parts of our bodies.
yeah, there's really 3 things that people should think about. You have like the mechanics of your breath, the biochemistry, and then the respiration rate.
Okay.
So those are like the 3 main things. Mechanics is super easy. For most people, they should be breathing in and out through their nose at all times, especially like at rest. Like there are times when high level, intensity exercise when you're breathing,
a few times
just because you're trying to get volume in, like volume of air. So in and out through the nose, and then, yeah, like you said, kind of activating the breath in the lower part of the stomach.
Okay.
And really trying to focus on what people call diaphragmatic breathing. Most people will find themselves probably to be more like upper chest dominant. Like when they take a breath in, they'll kind of notice most of that air is up here.
All right.
We want to try to draw it down to the lower part of the stomach.
Why?
The lower 1/3 of your lungs is where most of the blood gas exchange happens.
Okay.
So super important there. Also activates the parasympathetic nervous system through diaphragmatic breathing. So that's really important. So important things to mention there. Just recap. Breathe in and out through the nose.
Okay.
And then use your diaphragm or like lower belly to try to inhale and exhale to control that breath cycle.
Very cool. Do you like walk around and you're like, they're a mouth breather?
I hate that.
Like,
Especially
they're a shoulder breather.
for sure. It's like you can notice it pretty well.
Is that where something like hostage tape came into play for trying to help people?
Yep.
So what's wrong with breathing through your mouth at night?
It promotes like snoring.
Okay.
Like snoring. It also like sleep apnea. That's what causes that.
Which is you're kind of like depriving yourself of the right amount of oxygen at night. Yeah. So you're never going to hit that like rest and recovery stage that everyone's trying to get.
Yep, exactly.
That's cool. Yeah. So breathe through your nose and down into your belly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then when we go into like kind of the biochemistry aspect of it, the important thing is the volume of air that you're breathing in.
Okay.
So like literally just like how much air am I taking in when I breathe in and letting out when I breathe out. Most people never think of that.
All right. Yeah.
So it's like, yeah,
that's definitely not a thought that's crossed my mind.
But there's actually like a specific amount of volume that you should be taking in. And most people overbreathe. So they're either breathing. It's a combination of breathing too fast, like too many respirations per minute. And then also a lot of people think like they do this in yoga too, which kind of like pisses me off, but they'll take a big breath in and a big breath out. Right. And it's like, well, if our body's at rest and we're not doing like high work, we don't need that much air really. So most people overbreathe there.
And what's the problem with overbreathing? Like what does that trigger in your body when you...
Yeah. You're typically just off-gassing too much CO2.
Okay.
So CO2 is not just like a waste molecule. It's not like a gas that, well, most people think of CO2 as like bad, right?
It's like your breath when you breathe out, but it plays a vital role inside your body.
Yeah, very vital. It's what allows our body to actually like break apart oxygen from blood in your body and allow your body to absorb oxygen in your working muscles and tissues. So the more CO2 you have in your system, the easier that process is for your body.
And so when you take a big breath in and a big breath out, you're kind of wasting some of that conversion.
Yeah. And you're basically training your body to be less tolerant to higher levels of CO2. This is super important if you're like a free diver. Like people will know what I'm talking about if they're in that world, because they have specific like breathing training programs designed to increase their CO2 tolerance.
Which allows them to hold their breath longer and go to greater depths where they have the pressure on their body. Yeah. And most people think of like when you hold your breath, most people think they're running out of oxygen. That's why they want to breathe, but that's not true. Yeah. Like that's not it.
You can actually hold, like anyone could hold their breath probably for like 3, 4, 5 minutes because they have enough oxygen in their system.
Okay. So what's causing it?
Yeah. As soon as you start to hold your breath, your CO2 levels start to rise because you're not exhaling
so you're creating this like gas in your body.
Yeah. So
that has to go somewhere.
Yeah. And again, most people's tolerance is very low, so that becomes uncomfortable, and that's what builds up that urge to breathe, and that's why people want to take a breath in when they hold their breath. Yeah.
Here we are thinking.
And you can actively just train your body to be more adaptable to higher levels of CO2 through particularly like static apnea training. So again, they have like tables, or you can just start to hold your breath and like, week by week slowly increase that, decrease your rest time between sets and stuff like that. So just like training for like something in the gym, it's just through breath work. You're just
training your breath. Pablo and I were on that course when we lived down in Miami. Josh and I are from Florida, so all water sports, including free diving, are what we grew up doing. But Pablo and I were doing the static breathing exercises in our pool and trying to get ourselves in a place to be competitive in the Bahamas when we were spearfishing with you, but I think you're going to beat us every time. And you're about to do some free diving stuff,
yeah, hopefully
too.
I'm going to go like get certified and do like a legit course.
So cool. So CO2, it's so funny because when you and I were first talking about CO2, I was thinking plants and people are so similar, because when Pablo and I were growing cannabis plants, monitoring the CO2 levels in the room throughout the day, as plants are waking up and then when they go into their night cycle, it's the same way we have to like feed plants, the same way we have to like feed our bodies, the same way we have to monitor our CO2 levels. We're just really complex versions of plants.
Yeah.
So CO2, another funny story is, I think I've told you this too, Remy is like hell-bent on beating you at holding his breath, because in our family he's like, Josh can hold his breath the longest. So every night in the bathtub he is putting his goggles on and holding his breath underwater. And I have seen him over the last like 2 years of him obsessed with this, like he can hold his breath for a really long time
awesome.
now. And so he's been training this in his body without me even knowing what's happening.
Right.
So watch out, free divers. He's coming up
cool.
on everyone's heels. So, okay, so now we understand that when we're holding our breath, it's not the fact that we're running out of oxygen that's making us want to take a breath. It's actually the buildup of CO2 that's causing that urge to breathe. And then to release that, is it like, can you just let out a little bit of air at a time? Or is there a way to combat that besides
it's
practicing?
Just training.
It's purely training.
Yeah. So it's like a lot of free divers, they'll talk about these like involuntary muscle spasms they have. It's just something that you have to train your body to like overcome.
Cool.
And most of it's mental, right? It's just like you're like, because CO2 kind of acts as like a stress molecule in the body. So it like,
your body starts
we're going
out.
through like this fight or flight phase basically in real time, because it's our body's way of saying like, hey, we need to breathe, like
help.
But again, just like anything, you can kind of train your body to be more adaptable to stress in those specific environments.
Very cool.
And then the last thing is just the respiration rate.
Yes.
So like if we got these 3 key things, it's the mechanics, it's the volume of air you're breathing, and then it's how many breath cycles you're going through.
And there's like some crazy number here that blows
6,
my mind.
yeah.
That's so
6.
crazy. That feels like you'd be like...
Quite slow. For 99% of people, it's not like a number I would shoot for as like what I'm trying to do throughout the day.
Okay.
On like a minute by minute basis.
Right.
But it's like if you're going to sit down and like, hey, I'm going to breathe for 10, I'm going to do my breathing exercises for 10 minutes. That should be the goal, is like at, 6 or below. Or if you're starting off, like maybe it's 8 or 10 if it's like super uncomfortable. Yeah. And then kind of slowly wean yourself down. But that's the number that's been heavily studied like in the academic space to promote parasympathetic activation as well as increase heart rate variability.
Okay. So this is calming you down.
Talk
about heart rate variability too.
Yeah, so heart rate variability is basically the amount of time in between each heartbeat that you have. It's variable, right? So it's not meant to be the same each time.
Okay.
It's actually the more variability there is, the healthier your nervous system is, the more adaptable to stress your heart is and your cardiovascular system. So there's,
That's really cool. I know I have you back on the show where we talk about some of the tools to measure things like that, because I know for a while, Josh and I would be sitting on the couch having these conversations. I'm like, how the fuck do I measure my heart rate variability and then like be able to take that data and apply it?
Yeah.
So we talk about like Whoop and tools that
bunch
you
of
can
cool like
measure
wearables and stuff now on the market that are pretty accurate, like clinical grade accuracy of that
Very
stuff.
cool.
So yeah.
It just gives you like that data set so that you can know better, do better.
Yep.
Okay, so 4-6 breathing. You're trying to get to 6 breaths in a minute. Walk me through 4-6 breathing.
Yep. So kind of maintaining those concepts we talked about, right? Breathing in through the nose, out through the nose, activating the breath with the belly. And then, literally just inhaling for 4 seconds, exhaling for 6 seconds. There's going to be kind of like a slight pause on the ends of those.
Okay, so you hold for a second.
Yeah, so there's like a natural pause that your body is going to do anyways.
Right,
Just let that happen. Some people get like super dialed in where they're like, oh, it's 4 seconds. It's like, you're going to feel like where your body wants to be naturally. And that's probably like where you should go. Don't fight that.
Okay.
You really just want to focus on kind of slowing everything down.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think the number that blew my mind was what you're supposed to breathe when you're sleeping. And then I got a Whoop a few months ago because I was getting so into this. And I'm so far off from where that is.
What is your nightly respiration rate?
I'd have to pull up my Whoop app. But what's the number that you told me it should be, like 12?
Like 12-ish, yeah. Like,
I want to say it was like way more than that.
Okay, yeah. That's pretty typical for most people.
So how do you
so
be better when you're sleeping?
It's hard. So it's like...
And why is 12 important at night?
Well, so it's not 12 per se. It's just you want to be lower, right? That just means your body is in like a more relaxed state. Yeah. You're able to recover better. You're probably getting quality deep sleep and REM sleep. Also, if you think of it like as our bodies are like machines, the less work we do, the longer that machine is going to last, right? The less repetitions. Like we probably all have like a finite amount of breaths we're going to take. So if we can extend that by breathing less and slower, like it's probably good for our longevity.
That's like a very complex thing to think about.
But yeah, so anything over 18 respiration, like your respiration rate, if it's over 18 breaths per minute, is like, from a clinical standpoint, considered hyperventilation. Okay. Most people are breathing that fast all the time. Yeah, even like maybe when they're sleeping or at like just sitting on the couch.
I want to say mine was like 15 or 16 at night.
Okay.
Well, context though, I have a breastfeeding newborn.
Right.
So I don't know if I'm ever going to go into REM right now.
For most people, whatever your sleeping respiration rate, like it's hard to affect that because it's subconscious, right? You're sleeping. So like you have to do some serious work to probably bring that down. Like a lot of cardiovascular exercise, a lot of like relaxation techniques before you go to bed at night. But it's like a process. It's not something you're going to do and probably see like a vast improvement, even like months. It's probably like years.
Wow. So you have to really be committed to learning how to breathe. Yeah. It's just wild to me that we don't learn these things in school.
Yeah. It used to be very like prevalent, like especially in the Native American cultures. There's some really cool like books and stuff you can read where they were very locked into stuff like this, even with like newborn babies. Like if like the moms saw the babies were starting to breathe out of their mouth, they would like lightly close their lips to promote like nasal breathing in babies and stuff. So.
That's crazy. Frankie, her pediatrician was encouraging us because she noticed she was mouth breathing to like subtly like try to close her mouth by pushing here. Yeah. Something about helping her develop those muscles a little bit more.
Probably, yeah. You know, again, from like a biomechanical standpoint, your body is a machine. Your nose was designed to breathe. Like that's its whole purpose and on the body. And so like there's a lot of stuff that goes on when you breathe through your nose. Like, you know, it's capturing a lot of like contaminants in the air. Filtering it. It's humidifying it. It's warming up the air before it reaches your lungs. You create a ton of nitric oxide in the nasal passages, which is a vasodilator to promote, you know, air and blood flow. So there's just like so many things. And like, when you start to breathe through your mouth, it wasn't designed for that. It's not doing any of those things your nose was designed to do.
So is there ever an application for mouth breathing?
Yeah, like high intensity exercise, to, like 100-meter sprints or, you know, all out effort in like a CrossFit workout or something like that. But the time duration of that should be like minutes, like, you know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes maybe, but most of the time, it's not really applicable.
Cool. Breathing. Is there any other concept that we need to know about as we like go and practice? Are there any starting points you would recommend for someone?
I think 4-6 breathing is the easiest place to start. I think lying down prone on your back is the best position for people to start trying these things, especially if you have difficulty like doing the lower belly region. when you lie down, you kind of have that hard surface on your back, so it's like a little easier to feel it if you're doing it
and
right
put
or
your
not.
hand on your,
Yeah, you can put there's like a high-low technique where you put one hand on your heart and one hand like right over your belly button.
Cool.
And just focus on, you know, only allowing that bottom hand. You should really feel movement. That's
okay,
a really
so like
easy
keep this one still.
Yeah.
Okay, I want everyone after this episode to lay down and try to feel where in their body they're breathing.
Yeah.
Because it's profound when you start realizing like all these subtle tweaks that you could make.
The coolest part, and I think why like breath work is in this like renaissance phase right now, is unlike meditation and some other things of like other types of relaxation techniques, is you can feel a real-time difference like right away, like within like a minute, you know, when you do some of this stuff. Whereas like I'm a huge fan of meditation, but like it takes people months, sometimes years to like kind of have like breakthroughs or whatever. So this is like a technique that, again, you can do just for a couple minutes in between meetings or whatever,
right,
and actually notice a difference in how you feel. And then like as you get more advanced, like you can play around. There's a lot of different cool like alternate nostril breathing techniques where your nostrils are actually tied to that autonomic nervous system. So if I'm breathing just through my left nostril and plugging my right nostril, I'm really activating the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. And then opposite, if you're breathing through your right nostril, the sympathetic side is getting more activated.
Is it always that way?
It's always that way. And it's a good way to kind of like see where you are in real time, but take it with a grain of salt because your body naturally goes through these different cycles throughout the day. But like, again, if you're like, you know, kind of just like, oh, I'm feeling like a little stressed out, like you can just kind of test it and see like, oh yeah, my, you know, right nostril is like way more open than my left right now. Let me like plug that and really focus on doing some parasympathetic activation.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
The nose knows.
The nose knows.
So you could literally just kind of check in with yourself throughout the day.
Yeah.
And then I know my therapist has us do like 2 breaths in, 1 breath out to try to like tap into a calmer.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to like tap into a calmer state of mind. But that's so cool that your nervous system is connected to your nostrils.
Mm-hmm.
Wild.
Mm-hmm.
Big takeaway there. Well, thank you for talking to us about breathwork. We'll provide some resources in the show notes for anyone that's looking for like, you know, breathwork 101 exercises to kind of watch someone do and tap into it. And I'm excited to kind of continue the conversation around like data and using the data to drive some habit around how you breathe throughout the day. So thank you for coming and taking the conversation of breathwork a little higher with us today, Josh.
Yeah, thanks, Devin, for having me.